Hello, everybody. So, Luke's trailer just came out, and it's actually 5 minutes. I consider it was actually rather long, and I have basically just pre-watched this a little bit, and I do have a little bit of commentary to make, considering that Act 2 of 3.1 might be rather interesting. So if you're interested in, for example, what I have to say, I do have a post on Twitter briefly talking about stuff like this, but I wanted to kind of just briefly talk a little bit about my thoughts and observations I had within this trailer. So, without any further ado, let's just quickly go and play through it. One thing I want you guys to notice is, of course I've pre-watched this, so I know, but there is a very cyclical structure to this whole trailer, where essentially at the very beginning, you have the death of Luke's father, um, with like how like he's very young, and at the very end, you're also going to get the revealing of his father's death when he's much older. So it's a very cyclical kind of trailer. And that trailer, like that thing is really good.
Fate offers you two blades. One is your father's mantle, the quiet life of a doctor.
And I want you guys to kind of pay attention to this because it's going to be very important later. Luke's father was, at least in his eyes, a quiet doctor, right? So probably a doctor, like a surgeon, wasn't very famous, right? And I want you guys to keep that in mind.
The other, however, means a life against the abyss. Cut into the truth and expose it to light. Which is your pick?
And one thing I want to kind of talk about with this is that there's this sort of like dichotomy, right? With the choice between the scalpel and the scythe. And one of the thoughts I really had for this at the very beginning was that this was a kind of very similar idea to Luke's Caduceus. If you don't know what the Caduceus is, it's the dual snakes intertwining around each other around like the pole that is on Luke's like outfit. It is below his collarbone. And the Caduceus is a very common medical symbol because snakes across history and mythology, especially when it comes to instances such as, for example, Asclepius, as well as also the bronze staff of Moses, snakes have had this kind of idea where they are both harmful but also healing, right? Where they are capable of, for example, like poisoning, but also it is their poison, like the anti-venom, that creates the cure. That's why, for example, if you've ever wondered, why are snakes, as such a venomous creature, are so prominent on medical iconography and symbolism? That's the reason why.
The quiet life of a doctor means a life against the abyss. Cut into the truth and expose it to light. Which is your pick?
And this is really just, I think, a display of the first of those two choices, right? The path of the scalpel. I don't know anything about medicine, so if you guys if any like doctor bros could figure out what this scene possibly means, make sure to put it in the comments. But I don't know what the hell is happening. That also means, by the way, operation in progress. It's very interesting how you see here, the previous scene was 3D rendered, but this was 2D rendered. So I've seen people freaking out about this, him washing his hands on Twitter, so yeah.
Dr. Herson, done for today?
And I want you guys to kind of see the transition between that scene, because usually, of course, when you have these jump cuts like this, within these character trailers, or also just like cinematography in general, that usually asserts that they are kind of like sort of like hiding something, right? They have like a dual personality in a sense.
Done for today?
Thanks for the candy.
I'm using the meds like you told me. Don't worry.
Be careful next time. That one almost left a scar.
It's fine. Scars can be a memento in a way.
A memento.
Like what did I say, guys? There's so many jump cuts in this trailer, and as I said before, there's probably a reason for that. Oh, okay. So that's like kind of like the straw hat, and I'll talk about this a little bit afterwards. So, by the way, guys, that's a Federate. Like, this looks very similar to a Jinzo Patroller uniform, but that's the Lolo Logistics logo. So, okay. So he was some sort of operative, like probably in a region of Huanglong, because I don't think this is Jinzo. If it was in Jinzo, we would have been able to see it. Bro was just looking at his phone, man. Like, bro was just looking at his phone. This is what happens if you get caught lacking, like, doom scrolling on TikTok. Oh, wait. So there's also other Lolo Logistics members, right? So it's not just Luuk. That's kind of confusing, right? Because if there's other Lolo Logistics members, are they in like cahoots with the Fraxters? Or are they like kind of like being sort of like forced to work for them or something? Or like did they even not even know that Fraxters was there?
Stop right there!
And also, by the way, like this setting. Yeah, like you see this is a shipping area, like a shipping bay. So it's most likely not Jinzhou, right? Because we know, for example, there's a couple we know all of the cities in Huanglong, at least by name, by the way. But this kind of feels like Mengzhou, right? Because when we first saw Mengzhou, there was a lore entry for it when we talked to Buling in Septimont. And that kind of showed that Mengzhou was a place of not only like traditional Taoism and belief, but also commerce, right? And I talked about this a little bit before, but this whole kind of like industrial shipping area, right? It feels very reminiscent of Guangzhou, which is like, of course, a real place in China, right? Guangzhou is one of the primary shipping hubs within the southern area of China, probably the main one actually. And essentially with all of that, like it kind of like pushes towards that idea, like Guangzhou, especially if you see Buling's dish, right? Buling's dish, which is a Mengzhou specialty, is kind of like some like chopped fish noodles, which is like, I can't confirm for sure because I'm not from Guangzhou, but it seems like something that they would very likely eat there, right? And if you guys didn't know already, Kure has a HQ in Guangzhou, and we already know that one of the regions that Kuro has created in the game, which is called like Mount Firmament. You guys know Mount Firmament, right? Mount Firmament is very heavily inspired to the point that we can basically be 100% certain that is inspired by a real-life province in China called Zhejiang. And one of the theories I really had was that Jinzhou, because Jinzhou was very focused on militarism and like duty and like this kind of Confucian ideology and values, it's very reminiscent of a place called Fujian, which is actually where I'm from, if you guys didn't know. And Fujian, Zhejiang, Fujian, and Guangzhou, they're actually three provinces that are right next to each other, right? So if there is any real-life analogs or kind of like inspirations behind the design language of like these places in Huanglong, I actually think that those three provinces and maybe like that kind of area within the eastern side of China actually could be a potential inspiration, at least. Not too sure. And like, yeah, like shipping containers, right? Like it's a shipping hub. Did they just really run away just because free craze fell on them? Like, I know it's scary, but like, bro, like you have guns, man.
You've changed a lot.
Oh, it's the same
People
guy.
always change.
And remember, like how, you know, there's like a bit of a juxtaposition. Like this guy keeps like coming up, and look, he's like it's juxtaposed with like the beginning scene, right?
Yet you're still obsessed with tracking down the Fraxiters.
So Luuk is tracking down the Fraxters. For what reason, we are not sure.
Because my instincts were
The
right.
other thing I want to note as well is that with like these crates, I'm not saying like the Fraxidus can't use crates, right? But the fact that they have like branded crates in a shipping facility kind of like makes me think that they are much more sort of like organized and commercialized than we may perhaps know.
Because my instincts were right. I've made discoveries.
Okay. So Novial Regenerative Group has reportedly halted development of a golden serum for rare diseases. It is said to be linked to the death of their CEO. So the golden serum, if you guys didn't really know, this was actually mentioned in the 3.1 live stream. This is the ichor. It's like a golden liquid that Luuk has in his veins. That's like a kind of like miracle medicine that heals his injuries, and it also gives him a lot of powers, but it's very dangerous. It has a lot of side effects, and it has caused him to develop these gold veins along his body, which is why his design is as is.
About his death.
About his death. So this is his father. Okay, so this is like Luke's father. Remember at the very beginning, like when he was visiting the grave of his father. That's his father. The putrid truth behind the gilded name of Novial. So I actually did search this up beforehand, guys. Novial actually comes from the Latin word novus, and novus just means new, right? So Novial is kind of like a more modern Italian way of like a name given to like novus as a word. And Novial seems to suggest to me that basically it's kind of like a revolution, like a sort of renaissance, or like a newcomer, a brand new kind of like drug, which kind of like checks out, right? Because they're making the golden serum. And as we said before, when they halt the development and this golden serum is very dangerous, we know that from 3.1, the live stream, it seems to suggest to me that this is kind of like something which feels very New Federation-esque, right? Because I've made a couple of posts on Twitter already talking about how I think the New Federation is basically very reminiscent of late-stage capitalism and a lot of dystopias like Blade Runner and, for example, cyberpunk and stuff like that. So this idea of like the golden serum, like this crazy like side effect magic drug is very New Federation-esque, and we're basically going to be able to get that fact confirmed later. But I will I'll just blue ball you guys a bit. I will wait until we finally get to the point.
Putrid truth beneath the gilded name of Novial.
And gilded, if you guys didn't know, gilded is a word which means like covered in a layer of gold. So something that is gilded is usually very pretty on the surface, but inside it's hollow and fake. So Novial is most likely, for example, going to be like a shell company, or like some sort of like has some sort of corrupt roots or whatnot.
Golly.
It's fine. Scars can be a memento.
Ooh, scars can be a memento in a way. This kind of like, because this kid was the guy who was like, who took the drug, right? Took the medicine that Luke gave him. So it kind of implies to me maybe that maybe he used like the ichor drug a little bit and it has like adverse side effects. Scars.
To be a doctor, you must handle a blade. Scars can.
By the way, guys, we did actually translate this page, and this page is very important. So I'll put it on the screen when I'm editing, of course, but this page is of essentially Luke's father, right? Or who we think is his father. And there's a couple of key details that we get. The very first thing we get is that he's from the New Federation, right? Of course he's from the New Federation. All this corrupt, sketchy sort of shit. New Federation Corp, right? We also know that his father is actually the CEO of this Novial Corporation. And what that usually means is, if you guys remember, at the very beginning, Luke's father was said to be a quiet doctor. So what that kind of implies to me is that he's either not a quiet doctor, maybe he's living a double life, or this is kind of like some swash-lush, like grand architect sort of shit. And basically, he's just being impersonated, right? Maybe he's using his identity to kind of like do all this like sort of like corrupt sort of stuff when it comes to this medical company. Or as we said before, Luke described Novial as gilded, right? So it may be kind of like a shell company or a front for the Fraxidus, since they've been so prominent in this trailer.
Memento. You swore to become
And like, look at, I think people have talked about this on Twitter already, but like this pose is like very Cristoforo core. Like, what's the name of the girl in 3.1 part 1? I forgot, but like, it's a very Cristoforo pose. And the other thing as well, you swore to become a great physician, did you not? I find this very interesting because one of the things I kind of talked about when it comes to Luuk, is that how his name seems very reminiscent of a way of saying Luke, who was a person from the Bible, right? And Luke within the Bible was directly quoted to be, I think it was, I have to remember, I don't remember, but it was something very close to a great physician, right? I think Paul the Apostle directly kind of said that to him. And so we've always considered Luke, the character from the Bible, to be like a doctor, a physician. So you swore to become a great physician, did you not? Seems to kind of like nudge Luuk towards that direction of that sort of like biblical reference or analogy.
great physician, did you not?
And that's sort of like the emphasis that Luke's father, or at least like the mirage of who Luke's father really is, really emphasizes that, which is interesting.
This scar should never fade, even when he...
And one of the things we know, because we now have the Resonator sort of like showcase for Luuk, is that the scar that should never be healed actually kind of like pushes us towards this idea that Ichor leaves a scar that you can't heal, right? It's just a drug that you cannot heal. That's why, for example, his tacit mark is from an unhealable scar.
His death was merely a ruse.
Yeah, okay, like this is so like slosh, like Grand Architect sort of thing. He did it to Cholyun's master, he did it to Leon, the guy from 2.7, and now we even see Luuk has been involved in it. So considering that Luke's father, or like the fake father he had, was the CEO of a New Federation corporation, like it really shouldn't be surprising, guys, but the Fraxidus has very heavy, probably even commercial and business political ties within the leadership of the New Federation.
Before that day, my real father was long gone.
The way they kind of design the cinematics and the sound design of like the heartbeat track and whatnot really makes me think that after we know Luke's backstory, this Resonator showcase is gonna make so much more sense. And one more thing I'll say as well is that there's been such a heavy emphasis of winter and snowy motifs across both of the characters in 3.1, being Ameth and Luuk, right? With winter, and also the 4 of winter resulting in spring. So we're probably going to be seeing that rather soon. Damn, bro. that's actually a fatality. Does this not remind you? Like, this reminds me of like a scene from like Modern Warfare 2's campaign, when like Roach is hanging off like a cliff, but. Maybe that seems completely irrelevant, but just reminds me of that.
See those plagued by illness? Their hope flows inside your veins.
See those plagued by illness, their hope is in your veins. I think that's actually something you can take literally, because what is in Luke's veins? The golden blood, the Ichor, that has amazing medicinal properties, but also we know has like very adverse side effects. And also the other thing as well, this chain from the grave seems to imply to me like this kind of like sort of like
Inside your veins.
Symbolic like illusion that basically he's chained back by perhaps his past, like his father's like sins or whatnot. And I think that was actually referenced within one of some of the drip marketing of Luuk, is that he's chained back by his past. This visual imagery of the chain towards a grave is a very good parallel for that.
Greatness always calls for sacrifice.
And one thing I want you guys to kind of like notice is that when they say greatness always calls for sacrifice, you should be honored. Ichor's chosen one. Ichor, if you guys didn't know, I think I've said this a lot of times already, but Ichor is the blood that in mythology flowed through the veins of the classical Greek and Roman gods. So the fact that Ichor sort of like chose Luke, that it runs through his veins, means that like he's effectively chosen by God in a sense.
You should be honored.
Also, one thing I want you guys to notice is that in this scene, like in this photo, right? This is actually Eglatown. So I'll compare the photo. This is actually Eglatown, and he's holding a trophy by the looks of it. So it seems like Luke did travel the world when he was a kid. Like maybe these scenes.
Greatness always calls.
These are all places. Like for example, this looks like Eglatown, but maybe for example he was like Renacetan, or maybe like he's one of his like his father was from the New Federation, but his mother was like Renacetan.
Her sacrifice.
Because I'm pretty sure this is just Eglatown, right? And he's holding this sort of drug, which I'm assuming is like a prototype for Ichor. Like, I don't think we can zoom up into this book to translate it.
You should be
But these are all scenes from Eglatown, I think, no?
honored. Icar's chosen one.
And his chains, right? Chained back by his past. And also, like, I want you guys to see, like, the golden accents throughout the Wuthering Waves logo. That's, like, his veins, right? The golden veins. Being frozen over.
I've been thinking about it. Scalpel or scythe?
It seems you found the answer.
The answer is, I don't have to choose. A blade can carve out the rot.
And this is really interesting. I think the way he answers this hypothetical, this rhetorical, sorry, is very interesting. Because the fact that he's kind of characterizing that a knife or a blade can be both healing and, for example, harmful is really just like the same thing as the symbolism of the Caduceus, right? The symbolism of snakes. Like snakes can be like so medically, symbolically charged in medicine because they can heal as well as poison. And I think even, for example, stories like the bronze staff of Moses, you can see that, you know, like snakes were capable of healing. That's why, like, for example, Moses' bronze staff was capable of healing the poisoned Israelites. But it's really just like what you do with it, right? Like whether you use a knife for good or for bad, like for harm or for like healing. Like it's really just dependent on your will.
More into life. It was never about the blade.
Yeah, but like it's never about the blade, but the heart of the wielder. That's basically what we just said, right?
The heart of the wielder. The snow has stopped.
This fading away. So I feel like this character in this sort of like mindscape is a figment of his consciousness, or maybe his like mental world. It's not like a real thing. But I want to know like why is his world like this? Like for example, what is like the architecture of the windows, right? Isn't that very Eglatown-esque? So maybe he grew up in Eglatown.
It's time for me to move on.
Oh, okay, Rover. Because we know from 3.1 part Act 1 that Rover had a bit of a big part in their life, and they had like a bit of history.
We'll make a promise, Luke.
Next winter.
Okay.
When daylight touches down.
Whoa, okay. Couple of things. So I think Luke being chained up is like a sort of image that has also shown up quite a bit in his Convene animation. And one of the things I've always kind of thought about this, even when we only had his Convene animation, was that this feels a little bit like Prometheus, right? Because Prometheus, if you guys didn't know, was part of like the Greek myths, and you know, like considering that Luke has Ichor in his veins, and Ichor is a concept of classical Greek myth because it's a blood of the gods. Prometheus kind of makes sense to be like fitting in the same sort of like context, right? And Prometheus was, I'm pretty sure, a titan who gave fire and enlightenment to humans. And because he gave humans his power, he was punished by the gods. He was chained up to a rock, and he got an eagle to pick out as like Zeus got an eagle because eagles are symbolic of Zeus, to peck at his liver every day, and it would like basically regenerate. You'd be in eternal suffering, right? This idea, maybe like for example, it's like this scene almost feels like kind of like Luuk is being chained. Like, is it by his past? Because Rover, right, who has been kind of like conceptually sort of considered like an arbiter and a god in a sense, is looking down at him, almost like Zeus looking down at Prometheus. And Prometheus, of course, gave a lot of benefits to humanity, right? Just like how Luuk, as like a physician, a doctor, is capable of like providing humanity with, like, not really, I wouldn't say enlightenment in a sense, but definitely beneficial and good things. So very interesting trailer so far, right? If you guys have any comments, this is just gonna be a quick video, like running through it. I'll see how long it is after I record it, because you guys always say, oh, every time you say it's gonna be a quick video, it's like 30 minutes or something. So yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed kind of like my take on this trailer, and hopefully in a day or two, we will be playing 3.1 Act 2. I'll see you guys there.